light of this pandemic, it's very difficult to do so safely, isn't it?
Yes, thanks for having me on the programme. I think you've said it in a nutshell there. You know, the right to protest and the right to express our opinions is really crucial, especially at a time like this when such significant decisions are happening, both here and I suppose around the world, and people do need this kind of the powerful avenue of protest available to them. But of course, we have to remember that we are, still in this emergency period, and people, have got to take steps to protect themselves and to protect the rest of us, and to ensure that all the hard work and sacrifices that have been made up to this point aren't lost by sort of inappropriate gatherings. And I think the crucial point here is that, we can engage and exercise our right to protest, and sort of follow the health advice at the same time. And I think, what happened on Monday was, I know it's concerning a lot of people in Dublin and also around the country, but I think, what really happened was that nobody expected so many people to turn up. I think the organisers thought, we're going to have a small group, people who live within 5 kilometres will join together, will observe social distancing, and we'll raise our voices in a very responsible way. And I think what we saw was just an incredible and spontaneous expression of, solidarity with people who are protesting in the US, but also, an opportunity for people who are experiencing racism here in Ireland to go out and show that this isn't just an issue abroad, it's also an issue here. And I think, frankly, the numbers, surprised everybody, from the organisers to the Gardaí to probably the protesters themselves. So I suppose what we're concerned about at ICCL is that, we don't want to see a disproportionate response where, the organisers are punished for something that they couldn't, have foreseen. And we also want to ensure that people aren't, dissuaded from going out and taking part in responsible protests that actually follow the health advice. And we do think that there are ways to do that.
Go ahead, because I'd be interested in hearing them, because it seems almost impossible looking at some of the pictures from the protests on Monday. I don't see how social distance of 2 metres could be maintained in that situation.
Yeah, and I think it's very important, for everybody to sort of just acknowledge that, this kind of congregated setting, or where you have people sort of in such close spaces, is not something anybody wants to be seeing at this time, and we need to take steps to ensure that doesn't happen. And I think the main way to do that is firstly sort of following what the Gardaí's approach mainly has been since the beginning of the lockdown, which is education and advice and encouragement, so that people are not planning the huge events, but also not necessarily participating in something that they think is going to be a huge event. But there are ways to exercise the right to protest without gathering and congregating in large groups in one place. For example, you could potentially actually be in complete compliance with the regulations if you have lots of small protests. You could meet in groups of 4 at loads of different places within 5 kilometres of your home and express, your right, raise your signs, and you could probably even join in with other groups of 4, in chants or however you want to express yourself.
Would you agree that somebody has to be responsible and accountable for these gatherings? If somebody is organising this kind of a protest, they have to ensure that these things are implemented, because they're very difficult to police.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, I just think that nobody could have foreseen the amount of people that turned up on Monday. And I suppose now the flag has been raised, organisers can ensure that they are, sending out very, very clear messages that anybody who turns up has got to engage in social distancing, shouldn't be going necessarily beyond the 5K of their homes, and encouraging other ways of expressing their views. And that might mean, as I said, gathering in the small groups, maybe moving some of the protest online, maybe sending representatives of groups rather than, in entire groups. And so I think there are ways to responsibly manage it. And from our understanding of what happened on Monday, the organisers really did intend for it to be a small gathering where they had encouraged social distancing and they had engaged with the Gardaí. So, my view would be that this kind of large scale sort of protest of a lot of people in one space was probably an anomaly that we're probably not going to see again, because we understand from what we know, that's not what people intended, and everybody really is aware of the situation we're in.
Okay, Doireann Ansborough, thank you very much for that. I want to bring in Rise TD Paul Murphy, a frequent protester himself, because Deputy Murphy, you have been calling for the expulsion of the US ambassador. Why?
Because I think what happened in terms of the murder of George Floyd, yet another black man, and there's been many black women as well, murdered by the police in the US, is absolutely horrific. And then what we've seen, uprising of protest against that right across the US, being met with incredible levels of repression by the Trump administration, by police across the US. I mean, you now have over 10,000 protesters arrested. You have rubber bullets being used against protesters. You've been media and journalists being targeted, people being moved out of the way so Trump can have this, authoritarian press conference with the Bible in his hand. What's happening is a level of repression which is akin to the sort of stuff that you would see in dictatorships, and therefore the Irish government has to come out and can't equivocate, has to make a clear stand internationally to say, actually, no, we're against what Trump is doing, we're against the racist murder of people by the US police, we stand with the Black Lives Matter protesters, and bring Edward Crawford, the US ambassador, into Ireland to explain, the opposition of the majority of people in Ireland and the solidarity of the majority here with the majority in the US who stand against Trump, and to explain that he's not welcome here as a representative of Donald Trump while the US police forces are brutalising peaceful protesters. And that would send a very clear signal to the US, to Irish Americans, and to the people who are on the streets as well as right around the world.
It certainly would send a very clear message. But what are your thoughts? Eamon Delaney also joins us on the line, a former diplomat. What are your thoughts about Paul's suggestion?
I think it's a step too far, like it's a giant leap, really. I mean, Paul didn't even mention the possibility of taking in the American ambassador and dressing him down or asking for an explanation, as has been done with the Israeli ambassador, for example, or other ambassadors. Like, expelling him altogether would be a nuclear step, if you like. And I'd even think that calling in the ambassador seems kind of pointless. I mean, just to step back, Frank, and give you the big picture here, like I wrote a piece almost exactly a year ago, 6th of June 2019. I just Googled it there in the Irish Independent. At that stage, Trump, and nothing as bad as what we see now, but at that stage he really was like causing chaos everywhere, attacking NATO, attacking China, verbally attacking, and trade agreements and climate change being thrown out. But I said, nevertheless, the fact is, and the big picture is, that we have a long-standing relationship with the United States, as do the Western countries in general, as does Western Europe. But in Ireland's case, it's particularly strong because of the ethnic connection up to immigration. We have it through trade and economic investment here, family ties. So Trump's not going to be there forever. Hopefully he may not even be there more than another year or so. Someone else will be there. Things will go back as they were. We've been through hard times before, and where I would share Paul's concerns and everyone else's concerns of what's been happening in America, I think it's just a step too far, yeah.
Paul, what do you say to that this could possibly be a situation, as Eamon says, of cutting off your nose in spite of your face, that these close ties that Ireland has built up with the United States down to the years could be damaged to a huge extent?
But the close ties that are important, in my opinion, are the close ties to ordinary people in America. And a poll came out just in the last 24 hours, and that 64% of Americans...
Oh, there seems to be an issue there, but we're okay again, Paul.
I'm sorry, you there?
Yeah, there just seems to be an issue with your line. There seems to be some sort of interference, but it seems to have cleared up. We've actually lost Paul, so we'll go back to you, Eamon, and just on that point, I suppose, that these close ties with Ireland, it's not just about the man, is it? I mean, everybody will have a certain opinion about the president in office, but it's about the office, and it's about opportunities like we get, and we're lucky to have it once a year, going to the White House on St. Patrick's Day.
make maybe Paul's point for him. I mean, it shouldn't give a carte blanche to everything the Americans do. Our links with the American people and what's been going on there. And I lived in, it was based as a diplomat in North America, in New York in the 1990s. There were big cases then, Frank, of police brutality. Rodney King, of course, the riots all over America. LA was on fire. And it's depressing to see how things have not advanced. But just as regards Ireland's position, it shouldn't give us a carte blanche. And I remember when Claire Daly made a speech in the Dáil, saying all you were doing was putting on short of doing was to bring on a leprechaun hat and welcoming, I think, Bush at the time, and a senior Fine Gael minister who won't be named, but very senior, almost leader of the party actually, and deputy prime minister role, whatever, said to me, I thought that was a fantastic speech. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, because it says what so many of us want to say but can't, because we're beholden to the US and investment and so on. So this kind of Fine Gael right-winger thought it was great what Claire did, because that was the point. Like, are we going to be forever, the Shannon stopover?
You've taken the words out of my mouth there, because that was absolutely cringe, where you have the red carpet literally rolled out for Donald Trump, and he wasn't president at the time.
This wasn't even that particular Trump visit. I think that the red carpet and the diddly eye. This was actually a visit by Bush. I think it was Patrick's Day and so on. But can I just jump in and say two quick things? One is the American ambassador, from the tweets that I heard read out earlier on radio here in Ireland, seems surprisingly un-Trump-like in his language. So that's the first thing. I don't know if he's necessarily... It's almost like the American establishment abroad has been quite distant from what's happening in Washington. That has been known to happen in, having been a foreign service guy myself. You almost detach yourself because you realise that from afar it looks appalling. Yeah. That's the first thing. The second thing is Coveney has been pretty critical already, and the government has. I was quite surprised by the degree to which Varadkar and the Foreign Minister Coveney have both said, racism is an evil, we must fight it globally. Like, that's kind of pretty strong. That won't make the Americans pleased. So I think we just have to ride it out, see what happens. There's an awful lot of noise at the moment, a lot of comment, a lot of people jumping on the issue as if it's the same as their own. I see a ding-dong going on in the north about Sinn Féin, people saying, this is like what we went through, and people saying you shouldn't say that. So I think we just need to clear the air, Frank. But anyway,
we actually do have Paul back on the we actually do have Paul back on a better line. I might just give him the last. We do have to wrap this up. I might just give you the last word then, Paul Murphy.
Thanks, Frank. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. The point I was making is that the connections that I think are important are with ordinary people in America. Ordinary people who are black, who are white, or people of colour, Native Americans, etc. And 64% of Americans support the protesters, and a majority think Trump has handled the whole situation badly. And I mean, the point was made precisely that just calling in the ambassador is pointless. I agree. But we have to do something that therefore has a point to it and that sends a message. And there is precedent for this in terms of the Russian diplomat being expelled in relation to the poisoning of Skripal in Salisbury. And I think just the level of what is happening here is absolutely appalling. And by taking such a step, that would create a ripple around the world, potentially with others taking similar steps. And we're making clear we're expelling the ambassador as a representative of Trump. We're saying we're against this, and we're saying we're standing in solidarity precisely with the majority of Americans. I would also say we should take the opportunity to end the use of Shannon Airport by the US military, and that makes a joke of any notion of our neutrality and so on, and also tackle racism at home. But I think more than just words and platitudes are needed by the government.
OK, look, we'll have to leave it there. Paul Murphy, TD for Dublin South West, and Eamon Delaney, a former diplomat. And earlier we heard from Doireann Ansborough, Senior Research and Policy Officer at ICCL. Thank you all